welcome here. We've got quite an agenda tonight, a lot of people, so we're going to try and keep everyone as best we can. First up, we have. Can't hear me?
I noticed you have a speaker behind you.
There's a speaker over there.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah. I'll just keep this in the middle of my throat. And, all right. So first off, we have number one. Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2. Is that good? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay, so agency reports. First up, we have California Highway Patrol Cops Team Officer Hallgren. He's with us here tonight. Looks like he's not, so we're going to go right on to Los Angeles County Sheriff Residence Deputy Martinez. Welcome.
So the council just asked me to keep it to as far as with Edison tonight, things prudent to that. Just as, you know, we're a self-reliant community, so regardless of what change may or may not occur with them, I encourage you guys to just be prepared and make sure that you look after each other and look after your neighbors. You guys have elderly neighbors, you know who they are. Let's take care of each other, okay?
Great, thank you. All right, next up we have Los Angeles County Fire Department Community Service Representative Maria Mike. Maria?
Maria's not here,
Not here.
but she did send her report,
Okay.
and the report is for the month of October, there were 5 fires, 1 brush fire, quarter acre, 1 vehicle fire, a trash fire, a vehicle fire, and a vehicle fire. For some reason, the tick fire is not on here.
It started in Santa Cruz area.
Okay, so Santa Clarita, even though it started in Arizona. Then there were 31 EMS calls and 10 good intent calls. So that takes care of fire.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Acton on Woodelsey Library Report by Librarian Jim Wall.
Okay, librarian Jim Wall isn't here, but he sent the report.
Well, thank you, Mary.
And the report is gingerbread geometry, Saturday, December 7th from 12 to 2. Red Cross Blood Drive is December 27th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And he wanted to let us know that the SCE PSPS resulted in the library being closed on 10/28, 10/30, and 10/31.
All right, thank you. Now it's time for the 5th District Report from Stephanie English. Stephanie?
It's Nicole instead.
Nicole. Oh, that's right, Stephanie had, we changed the date. I have it graced with her.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be cognizant of your time and just ask you, are there any questions that you guys have regarding county policies, whether it's veterans, public works, regional planning, anything like that? Or would you like me to provide a report?
Yeah, but do you have a short report?
I can pick a couple of things out of there for you guys. So the Supervisor Barker introduced a motion a couple weeks ago to address some public health concerns when it comes to meal delivery services. It's called Seal the Meal, and so basically what it does is it encourages the California Restaurant Association, Grubhub, Postmates, as well as local restaurants to seal their packaging so delivery drivers cannot handle the food that they are delivering to their clients. The other motion that I'd like to mention is that the Board of Supervisors are going to address the rising mortality rate of the homeless population by assessing healthcare needs. What we're finding is that the number of deaths among homeless people have increased by almost 50% to just over 1,000 people. And the supervisors are very cognizant of the taxpayer dollar and want to connect with stakeholders like the homeless population, as well as care providers and other agencies that are in constant contact with these folks to see what the challenges are when it comes to accessing care, as well as what services need to be provided that aren't currently being provided at this moment. And I'll kind of leave it at that unless you guys have any other questions.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have California 38th Assembly District Assembly Member Christy Smith, her representative.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight for this really important community meeting. I'd like to give you an update on what our office has done, and I know I see Senator Wilk here, and I know his office has done quite a bit on this matter on behalf of this community in the last couple of weeks. But from our office, we've written a letter to Governor Gavin Newsom and the CPUC to communicate the grave concerns on behalf of our constituents from Agua Dulce. And I appreciate all of you who reached out to our office with your calls, with your emails. Susan in particular, who's here, has been incredibly helpful on relaying concerns, very specific emergent issues that have come to light as a result of the PSPS mitigation that we need to undertake. So before any power shutoffs continue here, we've demanded that the CPUC request that SoCal Edison reassess their mitigation plan for communities with the worst impacts of their livelihoods, and we certainly saw that here in your community, such as rural communities dependent on a single circuit. We've called for the immediate action, especially for medically fragile communities, and that is a bill I'm going to be carrying in the next legislative session. We are coordinating directly with Cal OES and with Supervisor Barker's office to identify and ensure funding availability for unincorporated communities to be able to access resiliency grant funds. Initially, those funds were targeted at incorporated cities, but we know that communities like these need them the most, and we want to make sure that we've got access to those. As recently as yesterday, I was on the phone with the governor's team, again stressing the urgency around this matter and the fact that we need to find some very near-term, very near-term solutions to address this problem. We've joined a coalition of legislators, and we're going to be working to address this from a number of fronts, but predominantly I'm here tonight to hear from you directly. I want to know your concerns. I want to be able to carry them not only to the legislature with me when I return in January, but directly to the governor's office, because we're not going to stop until this action stops putting our communities at the gravest risk. So I thank you for your time tonight, and I appreciate your concerns.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Scott Wilk, I believe.
Thank you, Town Council. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Last time I was here was like 15 people. Pretty good turnout. I'm glad you're all here because people say this is the new normal, and it's not acceptable to me. I know it's not acceptable to you. And we've all been working together on a bipartisan basis to address this. A couple weeks ago, Governor Newsom came out and he said he, gave directions to the PUC to do an investigation on what happened. That was the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. The PUC regulates these utilities, so they already ought to know what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, it's a revolving door of corruption between the IOUs and the PUC. They keep interchanging parts, and that is not the appropriate body to do an investigation on this. So Assemblyman Lackey and myself sent a letter asking the governor to appoint the state auditor. I think we need to have fresh eyes look at this, and not people that have invested interest in the status quo. So we've done that. Also, you may or may not know, we're currently without federal representation, which is problematic in a situation like this. So I sent a letter to FEMA. We've had actually conversations with FEMA about potentially coming in. So how we have to do it, I know that Acton Town Council has already done this. We need Agua Dulce to send a letter to the county asking for help, and then we have to go through the chain of command. But I think we should do that now so we have all the pieces in place if we need it, if we have to go through this again. Additionally, this on Monday, the Senate Utilities and Commerce Committee met. I'm not a member of that, but the Senate Pro Tem was kind enough to allow me to sit in on it. It was a 7.5 hour hearing, because as you know, there's a lot of questions. And what I did, I know Jackie did and some other people sent out, asked for people to send in their questions to me, as well as I was at the Acton meeting about 10 days ago. So you could go on my Facebook page, and we've kind of spliced them, but just for you, if you submitted a claim and it's rejected, resubmit it. Because allegedly they have broadened allegedly they're being more generous now, and we'll see if that in fact is the case. Because what happened at the Acton, I met two ladies, they do business from their home. And of course couldn't do business because no power for 30 hours. And so they submitted the claim was rejected, and then they were told take it to small claims court. So the question I asked, I said, okay, should we just not even file a claim with you and just take you to small claims court? And if we do take you to small claims court, who do we serve? Anyway, they said that they've opened it up, so if you've been rejected, resubmit. Next question, actually it was an email I got in Monday night. If you've gotten your power bill and they billed you for when you didn't have power, help is on its way, because they claim that they will correct that next month. So what they do, and the check's in the mail. Anyway, what's great is it's all, I should be with the interest. What's great is that this is all on video, so that's it. And then the third thing is if you have a serious health issue, life-threatening situation, we're supposed to recontact them, and then they allegedly are going to make accommodations. I don't think that's happened. I know Tom Lackey and I shouldn't say this because I don't want everybody calling me, but Tom Lackey and I, an 82-year-old veteran, disabled in a wheelchair, on oxygen, had his power cut off. So he called Edison and said, can you help me? And they said, yeah, call 911. So he didn't call 911, he called Tom Lackey, who's a softie, and then Tom Lackey called me, and then so we got a truck, rented a generator for him, and took it out and set it up for him, and he had it during that glass thing, which not yet. But the utilities ought to be doing that. Yeah. So anyway, so if you're in those situations, or you have a loved one in those situations, they're supposed to be making special accommodations. So there's going to be a lot of legislation next year, and I'm hopeful it's going to be bipartisan. I'm working with Senator Steve Glazer. There's two bills that we're going to do. One, which I think is germane to this community, is to require utilities to have battery backups on all cell towers. Yes. And then to, again, require the utilities to have battery packs for those vulnerable and ill health that it could potentially affect life-threatening situations. So we're going to be doing those two bills next year. I think they're great bills. And I agree with the Assemblywoman. I'm going to sit down and listen and take notes. And again, we're both here to advocate for you. And again, I'm glad you're all here, and can you ask your questions of Edison?
Great. Thank you, Senator. Next up, we have a representative from Assembly District, Assemblyman Person Tom Lackey, Brandon Road. Is that right? Brandon Road?
Close enough.
Close enough.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here as a representative of Assemblyman Lackey, as well as a community member of Acton. I know too well the PSPS shutoffs that have affected all of us. So, unfortunately, Senator Wilk took a lot of what I was going to say. So, realistically, I'm here to listen. I'm here to hear out the community's concerns, bring them back to the Assemblyman, and figure out what we can do to help. Our office is working very closely with Senator Wilk's office to reach out to the CPUC, to reach out, we sent a letter to FEMA, as he said, to try and get this fixed, to try and get assistance to our communities.
In my defense, I didn't take everything. I left you the best line and you didn't use it. It's not PSPS, it's PSBS.
I'm not allowed to say truly, everyone in Assemblyman Lackey's office, we feel your pain. We're part of the community. We understand everything that's going on. We are here for you. If you have any questions, concerns, whatever you need, reach out to our office. We're always here. Thank you, guys.
I think he didn't realize he was in Agua Dulce. Freedom of speech still. Okay, at this point, we've got a presentation. I'm going to tell you how this is going to run tonight. We're going to go ahead and have the presentation given by Edison. They're going to bring the representatives. They're going to sit over here. And then when they're through with their presentation, we're going to invite the public to come up. We've got 4 chairs here, so you can make a row. And we're going to just go 1, 2, 3, 4. Let them come up to the microphone, express their concern, ask their questions, do their venting, whatever they feel they need to do, and so they can be heard. I think a lot of the questions are going to be repetitive. So if you hear your question has been responded to or asked, there's no sense saying it twice. We made a list. In fact, I'm wondering, do you think you have to just read this list? We made a list that we provided to Edison, which we fielded quite a few concerns, and a lot of them were duplicates, so we tried to narrow it down to these 21 is what we came up with. I'm going to read these.
The top 3, 21.
The top 3, that's right. Number 1, outage caused Spectrum cable to go down, resulting in no digital phone service, no internet, and no TV reception. Number 2, lack of water pumping ability for fire, safety, drinking, and sanitary needs. Number 3, length of outage winds were minimal for 4 to 8 hours, leading up to re-energization. 4, impacts to the population reliant on electrical medical equipment and the number of local residents affected. This is a life-threatening potential. Impacts to schools for prolonged outages. Impacts to business for prolonged outages. Impacts to communication resources, landlines, reverse 911, cellular providers, and emergency services. Impacts to livestock for prolonged outages. Loss of perishable items due to lack of refrigeration. Inconsistent notification process. Residents work from home relying on internet services. Without internet, their businesses suffer. Number 12, home insurance rising costs and cancellation of insurance coverage. Number 13, property value. Number 13, property value decrease. Number 14, as winter approaches, cold and near freezing temperatures will set in. Like this afternoon, it felt like. A review, number 15, a review after each event to determine risks associated with PSPS impacts need to be calculated, and further refinement of PSPS procedures is necessary. Number 16, the high cost of being prepared. Number 17, what is the purpose of the continuing maintenance upgrades if certain conditions trigger PSPS, ? Once maintenance upgrades are completed, shouldn't that minimize future PSPS events? Number 18, what kind of local oversight monitors and or manages the community crisis during PSPS? Number 19, our well-being and security are jeopardized during PSPS. Number 20, if PSPS were forcibly stopped, what are the consequences to SCE? And the last one, number 21, what actually triggers the actual PSPS? A computer algorithm, a person, and what triggers re-energization? So those are the 21 questions we felt fair to provide them before tonight's meeting, so that hopefully they've done some research into them. And I'd like to invite them up right now to give their presentation, and we can continue this meeting. Stand or whatever.
So good evening, my name is Liz Gilman, I'm a government relations manager for.
We can't hear you.
No, it's on, it's so loud.
Hello. Good evening, my name is Liz Sealman, I'm a Government Relations Manager for Southern California Edison. I'm here tonight with Eric Takayasu, who's our Senior SCE Vice President for Transmission, Substations, and Operations. He will discuss SCE's wildfire mitigation plan.
Just in case the lights go out.
And our efforts to make our infrastructure more fire resistant, specifically in the Agua Dulce community and the Acton communities. I'm also here with my public affairs colleague, Bob Steens, who will provide more insight into public safety power shutoff, what that process looks like. He'll fill questions for PSPS and why we de-energize when we re-energize, those particular questions. I want to thank Mary Johnson for having us here this evening and the rest of the town council to address all these concerns. The month of October, everyone in the room knows this, was a very difficult and challenging time for Agua Dulce and the Acton communities. The impacts of PSPS were significant, and while the policy is meant to protect public safety from wildfires, we recognize that it places incredible hardship on families and on businesses. We recognize that. We recently presented to the Acton Town Council, some of you may have been there. We had that presentation on November 4th. Residents expressed several important concerns regarding PSPS and its impact on rural communities, on households, of course, that rely on water wells, and on properties that have livestock. I want you all to know that SCE does value your feedback. We are committed to improving our PSPS process. We want to make improvements, we want to hear the feedback, and we want to take it back to our company. In October, there were 4 significant PSPS events where we de-energized circuits here in town. At the time, we were able to provide a generator here at the Women's Club for 2 of those particular events. We also had a community crew van. Those had bottled waters, it had snacks, and phone chargers. Since our meeting with the Acton Town Council, we're committed to also providing a water tanker here to the community, so we can get ice buckets, we can get large amounts of potable water to your homes, other buckets that you potentially take back for livestock. We also have,
Remember the rules.
so, and this was mentioned by the Senator, but we also have a temporary new claims process. So if you are registered to receive our notifications, if you've had or will have an 8-hour or more outage and you've received less than a 12-hour outage notification, we will pay out qualified spoilage food and medications for residents and businesses. Any claims previously denied under the general claims are automatically being reevaluated. You do not have to resubmit that claim, they are being reevaluated. I also want to share that SCE has a process in place where we are reviewing billing statements. So of any accounts that have been impacted by PSPS. So we want to ensure that customers are not charged, as mentioned, for any time that you were not provided power. If we find any discrepancies, there will be an adjustment to your bill. Again, I want to reemphasize, implementing a public safety policy, or excuse me, a public safety power shutoff is a policy that we do not take lightly. As a company, we do pride ourselves on keeping the lights on. As we move forward, 2 of the questions we're looking to address is how can we reduce the necessity for PSPS, and how can we minimize the impact to customers? So I would like to invite Eric to talk about our wildfire mitigation plan and how SCE is working towards these 2 specific goals. And Lord.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. We're here, my team and I, to brief you, but also to listen. We want to hear your feedback and concern, and we will take that back as we look to improve how we execute PSPS. As you know, Agua Dulce and Acton are located in what is considered a Tier 3 fire risk area, which means that it's subject to more strict fire safety regulations for our utility infrastructure. And as a result, we have stepped up our inspections and are quickly working to harden the infrastructure as part of our wildfire mitigation plan. So let me just touch on a few elements of that plan, which you can expect to see here. We've already increased our situational awareness by installing weather stations, which improve our ability to detect hazardous conditions, and also high definition cameras, which we share publicly, and local fire agencies are able to utilize. utilize them to support our local firefighting efforts. We are also bolstering our operational practices, including more aggressive vegetation management around our lines. We're also installing more ways to further sectionalize our circuits in order to better protect not just our distribution system, but to allow us to reduce the footprint of where and how we de-energize. And lastly, we are converting our overhead bare wire on our poles with insulated covered conductor. So just a little bit about that. Unlike bare wire, which is an industry standard, should a tree branch, palm frond, mylar balloon, or any other foreign object come into contact, it will not create a spark and ignite a fire. So this is why this is one of the key features of our wildfire mitigation plan, because we do think that that is one of the key things that will allow us to begin to reduce the need to do PSPS. Most of Agua Dulce and Acton are served by two of our circuits, the Davenport and the Bootlegger. And we are quickly working to reconductor both of these circuits with covered conductor, which represents about 370 miles. About 189 of that, or 51%, will be completed in 2019, getting a running start into 2020. The Davenport itself represents 97% of the town of Agua Dulce, so it's a very important feature for us to be able to complete. These steps are important because over time, as we harden our grid, we expect to see a reduction in the need to exercise PSPS. So what you'll be seeing, if you haven't started to see it already, are starting to see more crews on the ground. It's important to note, though, that there will be the impact of maintenance outages as we do this work, as well as additional traffic congestion. So I ask for your patience as we do this, execute on these very important steps, because they're needed in order to continue to improve the resilience of our electric system and ultimately reduce the need for PSPS. So we expect to take on these improvements starting now, and we're accelerating those, but they will take several years to fully implement across the circuits that touch these two areas. One item worth mentioning is that we inspect our lines before we re-energize. And we've also discovered a number of situations when we do inspect where we've seen tree branches in lines and equipment damage, and have sustained damage that could potentially have resulted in an ignition. But I do want to say, though, that when I look, if we do these steps, and I do think that when we look back, the electric system that serves this community will be more resilient. It'll be stronger than it was before we started. So not only will we see a reduction in PSPS events, I do think we'll see a safer and more resilient system. So having said that, I know there's a lot of questions around PSPS, and I'm gonna now ask Bob Steens to come up and do this in more detail.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you, members of the town board. My name is Bob Steens. I'm one of Liz's colleagues in our public affairs group, and I help manage our wildfire program and our community outreach activities for wildfire. So what I would just talk about a little bit about is our process on how we decide when we're looking at PSPS, our timeline, and then some improvements we've made in our notification system within the last week, and that's since our Acton Town Council. As Liz mentioned, I mean, October was a tough month, not just for this area, but many places throughout our service territory. And in October, the National Weather Service issued something they very rarely, if ever, issue, which is an extreme red flag warning for much of Southern California, including this area. So our process for when we decide when to possibly do a public safety power shutoff, there's 3 buckets of information we use when we make a decision on a potential public safety power shutoff. The first one is the weather, all the technical weather information. As Eric mentioned, we've installed several hundred weather stations throughout our service territory, and many in this community. And what those weather stations give us the ability to do is determine what the wind conditions and the humidity conditions and local weather conditions are on a very targeted location. So rather than relying on the National Weather Service to say the weather conditions in Los Angeles County are X, we're able to get down to a very micro granular level. So we use that information that we collect from our very local weather stations, along with other pieces of data that we get from various sources. What is the fuel, how dry is the fuel in the area, what's the fuel moisture content? Several other pieces of information. It all gets fed into some very sophisticated computer modeling. We've purchased a couple of supercomputers that help us do this very sophisticated weather modeling. And it produces on a regular basis a list of, we have about 1,200 circuits throughout our service territory that are potentially subject to PSPS. So it goes through several times a day and gives us what the conditions are on those circuits. And if they rise to a certain level, then we could put them on what we call our monitor circuit. So we're looking out for those and watching those very carefully. The other piece of information we use when we make a decision to de-energize, potentially de-energize, is once those circuits go on that monitor list, when we get closer to what we call a period of concern, which is when we might turn off the power, we send our crews out into the, patrol those lines. So you might have seen some of our crews driving around those lines after you had received the notification for a potential PSPS. And what they're doing is telling us what they're observing on a real-time basis. So they have their handheld weather gauges to give us maybe a little more accurate, not accurate, but a little more local weather data than we're getting from our weather stations and other sources. But more importantly, they're telling us what they see. Are they seeing, it's windy, but things are pretty calm, we're not seeing much vegetation blowing through the area? Or are they seeing, there's a lot of vegetation blowing through the air, there's tree branches, shrubs blowing through the air, potentially lines slapping together. All that information is relayed into our emergency operations center real time. So they're calling into us either on their radios or cell phones to report real-time information to our emergency operations center and our incident management team that's managing that situation. And that's very important information. I've been in our emergency operations center several times, and it's very important information that we're receiving. The third piece of information we use is information from our first responders, from our in this case, the LA County Emergency Operations Center. What else is going on in the area? Is there potentially another existing fire in the area? Is there a need to keep power on to facilitate evacuations? Now, we've done that in the past, and one of the most, I don't remember which incident over the last few months or so, there was not LA County, another county who requested us to keep power on to help with evacuations. We were able to accommodate that situation. We may not always be able to be, depends on what the safety is, but we will try and accommodate that. So we use all three of those buckets of information. What is the weather data? What are our folks in the ground seeing? And then what is the information from our first responders, from our emergency managers? All that information is used when we make the decision to potentially de-energize. So that's on the decision to de-energize. Re-energize is once the conditions subside. So once the wind conditions, the weather conditions subside, and we think they're going to, not just subside for an hour, but we're confident they're going to stay off for the conditions are going to improve for a while. We then go out and patrol the line. We need to go out and patrol that line because we want to make sure in the period of time that the power was off, that damage didn't happen to the line, wasn't a tree branch, a balloon, or something else blow into that line, that when we re-energize, could start a fire. So we can go out and patrol that line. Fortunately, in communities like this, we can patrol those lines fairly quickly because most of them are accessible by the roads in the community. We don't have to go out and fly them in this area, but we can go out and patrol those fairly quickly. Once they're patrolled, the patrolman or troubleman calls it in on their radio, and it's energized within minutes. So let me talk a little bit about our notification process, and then some really pretty good enhancements we've made in that process over the last couple of weeks. So our notification process, our timeline for our potential PSPS. We start about 4 to 7 days out. We have a team of full-time meteorologists at Edison who are constantly monitoring the conditions. And when we get into conditions where we may be potentially doing the PSPS, they'll staff up, increase their staffing, increase their monitoring. And about 4 to 7 days out, they may observe something going on in say, LA County. We're not making any notifications yet, but this is our stage, our get ready stage. So at this point, we're putting we use incident management teams. So once we get into the situation, we staff our response teams that monitor this 24 hours a day. So they're put on alert, get told to get ready to come to our emergency operations center and spend a few days there. We then also begin just making sure we got everything ready to do our notifications, making sure that we have crews ready to pre-patrol the lines, and then once we get into the situation, to patrol the lines and monitor the lines. So that's our get ready stage. You know, we're not 100% confident, sort of like the weatherman, when he gives you the forecast, you know, 5 to 7 days out, you're not paying a lot of attention to it because it may change 3 times between now and then. But this is our get ready stage. Then at 3 days out, we're getting a little more confident in that this may happen. At this time, we begin our incident management team reports to our emergency operations center. And this is when we begin our notification. And our first, at 72 hours, 3 days out, we begin our notification process. And again, this is when I talk about the timelines. This assumes the weather behaves like we project it to. We all know the weather. Sometimes it'll happen faster than we thought it will, or many times it also doesn't happen. So at 72 hours out, we begin notification with what we call our public safety partners. So that's the fire department, the emergency operations center, the sheriff's department, hospitals, water agencies, water companies, water agencies, cellular communication companies, schools. We give them a notification like 3 days out because we want them to be on alert that this is potential. So then, assuming that if the conditions continue, 2 days out is when we begin our customer notification. And that goes through a process. It's actually pretty quick. We have a system in place that can do hundreds of thousands of calls an hour. But we begin again with our public safety partners. It's the first group of customers that get called. The next group of customers that get called are what we call our critical care customers. Those are customers that are on some type of a life-saving device. And this is a process that we have in place today. If a car hit a pole down the street here and power was going to be out for an extended period of time, we have a system in place in which those customers, they first get contacted by an automated dialing system. If they don't answer it, and this machine can tell if it was picked up by a person or just went to voicemail, we then wait a little bit and we'll have someone pick up a phone and call that person. If they don't answer then, we will send a representative out to their door, knock on their door, to make sure they're aware of in like this case of a car hitting a pole, that the power is out, they need to be prepared. The difference here is with the public safety power shutoff, we start that process 2 days out, so that customers can begin their preparation. We then begin calling, texting, emailing all the other customers that are on the list. I just want to remind everyone, if they haven't done so already, you need to go in and just like any notification program, you need to go in and update your customer contact information. So if you go to SCE.com//PSPS, there's a banner on the bottom, you can click on that. Because if you're like a lot of people, when you set up your account with Edison 15 years ago, you had a landline, you've gotten rid of that, you now rely on everything on your cell phone, but you haven't told Edison, you haven't told us that you've changed your phone number, or you want to be texted, emailed, or called. We'll do all 3 of those, whatever you register for, but you need to go in and update your contact information. That's very important. So let me talk a little bit about some of the improvements we've made in the last couple of weeks. If you looked at our website this weekend, it is dramatically better than it was 2 weeks ago. I will be the first to admit, or one of many who admit, that our website was not up to snuff prior to this last event. It's something we put a lot of effort into. But if you go on now, you can type your address to see if you're potentially impacted. You'll see a map, and not the PDF maps, you gotta try and pick the right one. But you'll see real-time maps of areas that are being monitored for PSPS, and then areas that are subject, that are de-energized. So you'll see that on our website now. It works on mobile phones as well. Some of the other notifications, improvements we've made, and I'll get my glasses out so I can get this website right. One of the other questions I know we had at Acton is we have a number of customers that are behind what we call master meters. So if you're in a mobile home park or some type of development like that where the meter, it only goes up to the beginning of the mobile home park, and then the people beyond it are not our customers. They're pay through their rent or whatever for the utility. So we have a new notification process where customers can register sign up on their phone to receive alerts based on their zip code. So you can go in, put your zip code in, and if there's a potential PSPS within that zip code, you'll get notified. So you can go to SCE.com PSPS zip code alerts. That has information on it, or I feel like an infomercial here. You can text enroll, ENROLL, to 28954, and you will be able to receive notifications of PSPS based on your zip code. Later, it's gonna also be voicemail and then followed up by emails as well. But we have the text alerts went into process last week. So those are three. Oh, and then the other improvement, upgrade we've made in our notification is we've partnered with the Nextdoor app. So we're gonna be using the Nextdoor app also to provide information on potential PSPS and actual PSPS. So that's what I have for our updates. Sure, telecommunications, I know it's one of the questions. We have had a number of meetings, workshops with the telecommunication companies, partnering with them on giving them information on exactly what circuits their equipment is on so that they can prepare. As I mentioned, they're one of the groups that get the 72-hour notification so that they can begin to prepare, enact their emergency plan. And I know the Public Utilities Commission is holding a hearing, I think, maybe today or tomorrow, with the telecommunication companies to get more information on what their process is. Because, it's important to realize that, PSPS is one of many reasons that we can have emergencies. We can have a fire, which we lose a power line to, or an earthquake or other major event. So it's really important, that not only communication companies, but any other companies and major providers as well as individuals be prepared for any type of emergency. So with that, I think we're ready to turn over to questions.
Okay, does the council have any questions before we open it to the audience? Okay, at this point,
First of all, good evening and thanks for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, go ahead and grab those.
We're gonna have to grab a mic.
First of all, good evening and thank you for being here to hear our concerns regarding public safety power shutoffs, the policy and how it affects our residents. And I'm glad to hear that you're improving your infrastructure. Here in California, we don't suffer from annual weather events, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, or below freezing weather as they do in other parts of this country. But we do have occasional earthquakes and wildfires, so it is still very important to be prepared for these emergencies. The town of Agua Dulce presents its own unique problems in a power shut-off. Without power, we don't have water, which in a fire is a very dangerous situation. Without power, partially due to our geography, some residents lose cell service, and if their home caught fire, they cannot call for help or put out the fire. When Edison presented this public safety power shutoff policy, we were told that there are local monitoring stations, and that when the shutoffs are necessary, they would be precise with their locations of the places they were going to shut down power. The outages we have recently experienced were rather extensive, shutting down the entire town of Agua Dulce and most of Acton. And during the tick fire, with Acton's power out and with all the roads leading west were closed, we could not get gas for our generators. Historically, the winds are worse and the fires are worse during the months of August through November. This is not a new phenomenon. I think that we are all very anxious during that time, but now our level of anxiety has basically taken over our lives, not knowing when the next power outage will happen. What we really need to know is Edison looking out for their paying customers, or are they more concerned with protecting their investors? Thank you.
Yeah.
So let me answer some of the questions related to the precise location.
Yeah, could you address?
Sure.
No.
no, he's answering, we're gonna open up to the community just a minute.
As well as this issue about re-energization. So in terms of when we look at the need to de-energize, the weather stations are positioned such that we try to get a feel for where on this distribution circuit, is it the whole thing or is it part of the thing? And if we see this being a wide event, then that does impact the whole circuit. However, having said that, sometimes it may appear that the weather or the winds may have subsided. And why is it taking so long for us to get the power back up? The reason for that is because in order for us to re-energize the lines, we do wait for the winds to die down, and when we do that, the first thing we do is we initiate very detailed inspections and controls on the lines to be sure that they're safe to re-energize before we do that. Because we know that there's a risk associated with the winds. We could have something that fell into the lines, and really the last thing we want to do is to create another fire because we're re-energizing and we didn't do our due diligence to really inspect to make sure that the situation is. As far as the fire department being able to fight fires, we have and work very closely with the fire department, so they have contacted us in a number of situations where they would ask for certain places to be re-energized because either we need to facilitate evacuation or maybe there's some equipment that needs to be on. So we do take a strong look at that to see what we could do. Can we make some accommodations for that? There are times when we can't do that, but there are certainly times when we have done that.
One of the questions that you'd asked if you're 21 also had to deal with public safety and making sure that local law enforcement, I think Bob did hit on the fact that we are working 3 days in advance to notify LA County Fire, CHP, the Sheriff's Department, that there's the potential to de-energize. I will also state that myself as a government relations manager who works in this community, we have close relationships as well with the local sheriff's captain and others, and I'm notifying them of the exact locations of the circuits as well that are being de-energized so that they can have appropriate resources in areas as necessary, because we know that it does create a public safety concern when the lights are out. So know that we're doing that on a higher level with the county. We're also doing that on a local level with your local personnel.
All right, at this point, I'd like to invite everybody, whoever has a question or a comment, if they want, instead of coming up to the 4 chairs, let's just go ahead and form an aisle coming toward the podium here. And one at a time, you'll have up to 3 minutes to state your question, ask your question, comments, and if you can give us your name first, and then follow up with your concern. Thank you.
My name is Amanda Buchanan. I am the president of the Acton Town Senior Association. Our seniors were very impacted by this power outage, either because they were prepared but were not physically able to hook up generators, or they had no idea it was coming because their power was off, their communication was off, etc. We, as a community, are more than willing to get together. Well, a phone tree won't work, but a visitation tree to go out and assist the seniors and those that need assistance in our community, those that are impacted. But we don't have the capability to know who all those people are. You, as Edison, you have a list of people on low-income power usage and people that use power for medical equipment. And while we understand there might be some kind of privacy issue, it would be wonderful if you could share that information with a group in the community that can then go door to door if the power looks like it's going to be off for more than 12 hours or so that we can go door to door and find out exactly what those needs are. Who needs a generator? Who needs a landline? Who needs some power? The biggest thing is, you think you know your way to the bathroom until you have no ambient light in your house. Put that on a 90-year-old, and it's a health hazard. There's broken bones, there's bruises, there's bleeding, and it's unacceptable. We are your customers. You are here to serve us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take everybody's questions and comments first, and then when they're all through, then we're gonna give Edison a chance to respond to
Taking
those.
notes.
Okay.
I'm John Morales. I'm here on behalf of Mike Garcia. And first of all, congressional candidate Garcia is unfortunately cannot be here tonight, but he sends his regards to citizens Agua Dulce and Acton. We deserve better than a utility company, and our state government subjecting us to these third world conditions. And candidate Garcia is asking Southern California Edison to commit to shutdowns not to exceed 6 hours in length. He also has 2 questions. Given that Southern California Edison, by our understanding, has 7 meteorologists determining when to shut power off, how many Edison employees are evaluating the health and safety of our citizens during the shutdown? in determining how long is too long? And second, will Southern California Edison commit to covering liability for loss of life during the shutdowns?
Thank you.
I am Shani from Dulce. And, first I want to thank you for being here, for answering people's questions. I understand while people are approaching you one by one, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that each of us only have one or two concerns. But the truth is, that's not the case. And I'd like you to listen to this list of hardships people are experiencing every time you shut off the power. And then I'll ask some questions and end with a statement. The concerns are we have no heat, no Wi-Fi, no water for bathing animals or fire control, no telephone service or security systems, no loss of, we have loss of food without generators. We also can't refrigerate our meds without generators. Many can't afford generators. Bronchial patients can't breathe with the generators running. Many are unable to cook. We're helpless in an emergency. Many locals are experiencing anxiety and emotional trauma. This is hitting us like a Chinese water torture. Okay, it's like drip, 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 psych, drip. And it's like, it's driving us all nuts. With the slightest breeze, we're freaking out. Okay, now, schools and businesses have to close. That's not okay. I've tanked my business. There's nothing I can do about that here, right now, while this is going on. I've lost my business. And even if businesses don't close, they are facing a huge loss of revenue. Now, I would like to know why it is that I went to your PSPS page and it suggested the tips page. You go to the tips page, it is outdated, it has nothing to do with windy conditions. It literally suggests that you can grill your non-perishables. Isn't that what started to take fire?
Yeah. Yes.
You also suggest on there for lengthy outages, more than 2 hours, that people, elderly people and people that rely on medical equipment should have a backup plan to get out. I don't get that. You know, are you basically saying if you can't handle it, go?
Yeah. Yes.
That's how it hits me. Okay, and I'm sorry, I was a lot calmer all the other times I've come to talk to you guys, but I've gotten no answers. And it's really getting to me. Okay, now during the winter, if it's raining and the winds kick up past 31 miles an hour, will you still shut off the power? When it's nice and cold? And then, continuing with that question, do you consider lightning to be a fire risk? Are we also gonna be dodging lightning? Are you gonna shut power for thunderstorms? Maybe SCE should stop looking at our concerns as complaints and accept them as real-life hardships that you guys are putting us through. If just one person freezes to death.
You're just gonna have to hold that to close service.
I'm sorry, if just one person freezes to death, or they lose their home because they weren't able to put out a small fire that's, you know, threatening them. You know, you guys are responsible for that too. It may not be your equipment, but it's your shutting it off that's causing it. And that's all I have to say.
Around my property, around my house, I have triple pane windows in the back of my house. I also had a sprinkler system put all through my house, which without electricity, I live with a well, so the well I have no water to douse the fire inside my house. That's basically what I just wanted to tell you, that I think I was prepared. How can I be more prepared than that for a fire? Thank you, and I'm sorry for everybody else's pain that we've been
Hi, I'm Amy Lamont. I'm Wendy's neighbor across the street. I want you to take a look at what your PSPS does to homes. We lost our home because we could not access our well water. My husband was home with our young son, and he saw the smoke coming. And normally, people that live in these rural areas, we would grab our hoses and hose down our home and prep. You know, we had our brush clearance. The fire department every year said how amazing our brush clearance is. But my husband didn't even have the chance to try and wet our home to save it. Our neighbor that stayed behind, his sheds were on fire. He actually saw the ember fly into our home and couldn't do anything about it, and called us crying that our home was on fire. I spent the night watching my home on the news burn, looking for rental homes, because I'm a planner, I'm realistic. And I think what you're doing is, you know, not only horrible for our community, but what a horrible precedent you're setting for our country, for utilities that, you know, in the past, utilities have kept the power on till the last possible minute. What's to stop other utilities from hurricanes coming and saying, you know what, instead of worrying about lines breaking and us fixing them, we're just gonna shut off everyone's power. You don't even give us a fighting chance.
Yes.
And this is what it does.
That's it.
I know that you know this happened to our home because we obviously had to cancel our account with you to open a new one at our rental. But not one person from Edison has reached out to us. The only person we have heard from personally, Senator Wilk, thank you, Assemblyman Lackey, and some media outlets. And that's, you know, and friends and family, of course. But Edison, you have yet to reach out to us. But you better believe I'm gonna file a claim. Not for only all the food I lost, of course, but I lost my home.
And it's Edison's fault.
I was next door to Amy and Wendy. We were there when the fire. So this nonsense that you say you're gonna have the fire department call you up and tell you that we need you to turn the power back on. That fire came through in 15 minutes. There's no time for that. We needed the power on then. Not to mention that you've been shutting it off for 6 months to put all these new fancy things that are supposed to stop fires from starting. So why was our power off in the first place? There's 38 homes, the road's 1 mile long, every pole, every wire, every washer, it's all been changed out. But you shut the power off from Palmdale all the way to, I don't know, Placerita Canyon. Why was our power shut off? You already fixed our road. So what that's telling us is for the next 5 years, even though our road is done, you're still gonna be shutting our power off. So whatever fix you think that you have is doing absolutely no good.
Hi, my name's Elisa Stern. I'm an LA County nurse. Closer, okay. Elisa Stern, I will say LA County nurse. You know, not a dumb person. I applied, I reapplied, I spoke directly with people on the phone. Yes, you were on the list. I didn't receive one notification. Show of hands, anyone not receive any
I did not.
notifications?
No.
4 a.m. after the tick fire. Phone goes off.
Yeah.
Mandatory evacuation. Right? Jump out of bed, scramble like, oh my God, the fire came this way. The wind must have shifted. You know, terrifying. Completely terrifying. And unacceptable. No communication. You can't see on television how close it is to you.
Yeah.
Nothing. You're just in the dark.
Yeah.
Scrambling for generators, going, you know, driving out to wherever you have to drive to go find a generator. For most people, not affordable. You know, not okay, not affordable.
I can't start it. I have to have my husband start it. I can't do it. So to expect other people to do it, even if they have one, who is gonna do this for them? As far as, we've gotta go and inspect the lines and see why, if there's a branch on them. How on earth would there be a branch on them if you've gone around and 12 foot down, you've already done all the trimming and whatnot and checked on this? So I see that, yes, directly under the wires, you've done your 12 feet. I see 100, 200 foot cottonwoods and everything else right next to them that are maybe that far, but come on, people, common sense. Where are the branches coming from? Not the ones that are under the wire by 12 feet. The danger is in the giant trees that are next to them. So are you gonna spend the money and talk to the people about cutting the actual trees that maybe you're worried about starting the fire? And lastly, why was Malibu still burning and only off for an hour? When we were off for 39 hours.
Yep. The Palisade.
What the price point is. Not okay. I hope that the community comes together and we can come up with some kind of list. LA County RN, you need something medically, call me, come to my house, I don't care. Let's take care of each other. Use this to, figure out who our neighbors are. I don't know most of my neighbors. I go to work, come back, and I'd love to get to know you, and let's take care of each other.
My name is Lynn Piper. I live here in Agua Dulce. At first, I'd like you to look around the room. This is how we live in Agua Dulce. Everybody bring their portable lights. Everybody has a way to see in the darkness that we're being provided here. I'm almost 65 years old. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. We still had party lights. But you know what we had? Power. We had lights. And when I grew up in the valley, we had the Department of Water and Power. The Department of Water and Power is not turning off lights. Why is that? What is different, and how do we get with the Department of Water and Power?
Yeah.
That's a good
My name is Susan Hardy. I live in Agua Dulce. I've lived here for 35 years. For 35 years, we've had Santa Ana winds.
Yes.
Nothing's changed.
And is it just a little coincidental that when PG&E got into trouble, all of a sudden Edison said, oh my goodness, we might have a problem. We need to be held accountable. We don't need to be held accountable. And you took it out on us.
Right. Yep.
We had an 8-day period, 6 days with absolutely no power, no water, no telephone, no landline, no computer, nothing. I'm 79 years old. I live by myself. What would I do if I had a heart attack or a stroke? How would I get help? I have no way of knowing. I have no way of communicating. I have no way of getting any help at all. So I die? Gee, guys, I'm sorry about that. This is unacceptable as far as I can see. I think you people are thoughtless, and I think you're thinking of yourself, not of us. And I think we're tired of it.
Yeah.
Rick Fox here. I'm an entertainer, musician in the entertainment industry. But more importantly, my wife and I, we live here, Agua Dulce, right up here on Darling Road. And we're members of CERT, Community Emergency Response Team, and it's part of our responsibility being trained at LA County Fire for emergencies. When these things happen, you're like the shortstop. You jump in there and you do something. You can't wait for somebody to call you and say, hey, can you go help me? When you see it, you act on it. That's how my father raised me. And by divine providence, grace of God, whatever you want to call it, my wife and I were rolled up onto the tick fire as it just began from up on Davenport. We just came around by Wagonville. My wife and I were two of the first 3 people to call in the tick fire to LA County Fire. And they mobilized fast, real fast. But what I'm going to say here, I already said at Acton, the Acton meeting for those who were there, this is just more for the benefit of our community, Agua Dulce, which is just over across Davenport Road is where the tick fire started. If the winds had been going the wrong way, we would have had a recreation of the Wagonville fire on steroids. And it would have wiped this way. We've already established that SCE turned off the power before the tick fire happened.
Yes.
Okay.
They caused it.
It was a barbecue fire down at that old Joe Conley, whatever his name is, that place down there off of Tip Canyon. They would not have been cooking barbecue if their power had not been shut off.
Right. Yeah.
Senator Wilk, you were at the meeting, you know what I'm talking about. If the power had not been shut off, they would have been able to cook their food. They would have also had power to their hoses if something got out of hand. So we've established a line of plausibility that SCE is partially responsible for the tick fire. And we watched the devastation cause. We watched that fire from a little wisp of smoke and watched it sweep up the canyons and over into canyon country. We saw what the damage did afterwards. I think SCE has to answer for that.
Yeah.
You guys are responsible for the tick fire. Okay, thank you. Oh, as an aside, just a personal note, this may or may not interest you. As a Polish American, Senator Scott Wilk's last name, Wilk, is Polish. No, seriously, don't laugh.
That's true.
Wilk in Polish is pronounced Wilk, and Wilk means wolf. What coincidental ironic that we have a senator whose name is Wolf who will bare his fangs in our behalf at the powers that be that will try to hurt our community. Thank you, Senator Wolf.
I have a question for you folks, is how many of you does it take to screw in a light bulb? When the power shut off? Okay, sorry. I wish I'd followed the woman before. I was angry at you guys. You have a mission. You are charged with delivering reliable, safe electricity without destroying property or killing people. You have failed miserably. You've done it all. You've killed people. Your power lines are not safe. You've destroyed billions in property. You state officials, same to you. You've been responsible, supposedly, for overseeing this mess that these people have created. Are they ignorant? Are they incompetent?
Yeah.
Are they evil? Are they criminal in their behavior?
Greedy.
Years ago, the state knew they were criminal in their behavior, and they dispatched helicopters to their Southern California Edison headquarters in Rosemead. Do you know this? It was a raid on Southern California Edison's corporate headquarters. And these agents from California Department of Forestry and other agencies were also descending on Victorville and other Southern California Edison communities. And they had to storm the building. They were armed with warrants of criminality. The state found so much suspicion, so much cover-up of fires that you've started. They had to resort to this, break into corporate headquarters, round up employees, conceal them in a conference room while they went through offices looking for evidence of the fire at that particular time called the Camp Fire, in which one firefighter was burned over 70% of his body, almost died. You have failed miserably. You know, Einstein, a lot of you have heard the old statement of what is insanity. It's doing the same thing over again and over again, making the same mistake, and expecting a different outcome. I say he has another one that I thought was maybe even more pertinent. You can't solve a problem by working within the confines of the situation that created the problem. Southern California, you created the problem, Edison. Government, state, you created the problem. You should not be charged with trying to solve the problem. You cannot. You are incompetent. your incompetence, your dishonesty has caused the problem. There are ways to solve the problem, but you can't do it. Who's responsible? We all know that corporations can be sued. There can be class action suits. Putting out to you that a class action suit against Southern California would be very handsome, appealing bait to a lot of legal law firms. Okay, that's a class action suit. You from Southern California Edison, so glad you're here, so glad we have your names. Every one of you is subject to a California state law. If your behavior is such, you can be fined, each one of you, $50,000. Did you know that? Did you know that you can serve up to 6 years in prison? Did you know when you're talking to the public here and you mislead them, that you're participating in obstruction? All you've talked about is how you're mocking up your own mess. You didn't talk about how you caused it.
Yeah.
You're the cause of it. We the people have got to get to the cause of it. There are ways to do it, but it has to be a third party. You can't clean up your own mess. You can't tell us about your high-tech sponges. Even it has the responsibility of causing that.
That's right.
My name is Carl Basal. I'm a resident of the area. I just want, I want to remind you about the history of PG&E, Southern California Edison, Department of Water and Power. You've electrified California for over 100 years. You've supplied electricity where California's become the greatest state in the nation. And the only power outages we've had is from expansion of the power grid. We haven't, since I was a little kid, and I'm older now, I've never seen a fire or any other natural or man-made disaster cut off electricity for any time longer than absolutely necessary. And I remember the 71 fires, which had completely encircled LA County. And the fire was only cut off, the Malibu fire, I remember 4, maybe 5 hours. Why? Because they were using the power for the wells, for the water. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why we need that power all the time. And it just seems to me that this is a natural resource that you guys are managing, and we're happy to pay you for it. In fact, you have monopolies on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as a monopoly, we ask you to go back to your rate, to your shareholders. Fix the problems. Change the management if you have to. But fix the problem so that you won't cut the power. So that any modernization plans will come out of the ratepayer, not out of the ratepayer's skin and future increases in prices, but out of the shareholders. And you enjoy the benefits and profits all these years, hey, it's time to pay the piper and put a little money back in.
Yes.
All right, and with that, I'm